Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we could make. We long to see the body of Christ look like Jesus. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. Go to shiftingculturepodcast.com to interact and donate. And don't forget to hit the follow button on your favorite podcast app to be notified when new episodes come out each Tuesday. And go right now to the app you're using and leave a rating and review of the show. This helps us reach new listeners so more people can enjoy the conversations like the one we are having today. So thank you for doing that. Previous guests on the show have included Andrew Arndt, AJ Swoboda, and David Zoll. You could go back, listen to those episodes, and more. But today's guest is Daniel Grothe. Daniel is the Associate Senior Pastor at New Life Church in Colorado Springs, where he's been for 18 years. He's the author of Chasing Wisdom and the Power of Place. We have a great conversation around the power of place and stability, rootedness, how the family of God could help refamily the world, and what we can do to help bring kingdom flourishing to a place and community. Enjoy this one. Here's my conversation with Daniel Grothe. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you on, so welcome.
Thank you, Joshua. Thrilled to be here.
I'd love to hear part of your story of what that looks like for you to figure out that stability and place and groundedness, faithfulness was really important in your life, and you started to see the value of long-term stability.
Sure. Well, two things come to mind when I think about why I wrote this book. You know, people who think about literature say that books beg to be written. There's certain books that are, I think, in each writer that writer, it places a demand on them. So there's two threads that come to mind. One is a family of origin thread. My grandparents have been on the Snake River in rural Lapwai, Idaho my grandma Weezy's going to turn 91 next week. She's been there her whole life on the land that her daddy bought. He was a Greek immigrant. His name was Hieronymus Athanasius Asimakopoulos, and he got on a boat in Greece when he was 12, all by himself, the youngest of 10 kids. His dad had just died, and he lands at Ellis Island at 13, not speaking a word of English, changes his name from Hieronymus Asimakopoulos to Harry Smith. They gave him a phone book, and he picked the most common last name, and he worked his way west, marries a girl in West Virginia at 18, lands in Idaho, and goes to the Nez Perce Indian tribe and says, I want to buy 2,000 acres. So this is the early 1900s. They had to write Washington, D.C. because the Nez Perce tribe is only allowed to sell 160 acres per federal law. Wow. So we steal the land from them, and then we give them reservations and then put limits on what they can do with the land. Wow. God forgive us. But my grandma Weezy still has the piece of paper that Vice President Grover Cleveland signed in the early 1900s to say that Hieronymus Asimakopoulos could buy 2,000 acres from the Nez Perce tribe. So Weezy is still on that land, and I would go work in the summers with my grandpa Dan. He died a few years ago, and they were married 66 years, living in this small community, farming the land. They knew everybody knew them. And so as a little boy, something in my imagination was connected to stability and place, small town, know the people, know the land, work with your hands. And I just thought that was normal. So that's the first thread of the story for why the power of place was in my soul. The second story is I go to seminary 12, 13 years ago. And I've been in church my whole life. I'm a pastor's kid. And I started reading, and I discovered that the saints of old, we all know they took vows. We know they would have taken the vow of chastity with their sexuality, the vow of charity with their money, the vow of obedience to Scripture. Yeah. We've heard that. That's great. What I did not know is that the very first vow that Saint Benedict called believers to take in 500 AD was the vow of stability in place. Stabilitas. Try to die where you are. Don't bounce around the globe. Don't live in this age of wanderlust. Don't think the grass is... Plant your roots. Find your people. Find your place. Try to die there. And that that took my life over. And it made a whole lot of sense to me because I'd watched my parents do it. I'd watched my grandparents do it. And I'm watching the world that we're living in. And I think we need a recovery of the vow of stability in our rootless age.
Mm. Yeah, I see that as well. I see it constantly. You know, as someone who leads a missions agency, we have people that are trying to get into missions for all sorts of reasons. And, you know, you wrote a bit about Mother Teresa, and the people that she didn't let come were the people that had community already, and said, you know, if they leave their own community, they will probably leave my community as well, looking for some long-term stability. And I think, especially in the missions world, we're working with people that don't often have long-term stability. But if we don't, I think we're missing something crucial, especially with the incarnation of what Jesus did as he moved into the neighborhood. He became human in every way, just like us, and said, let's move to a place of Nazareth, this small little town with Joseph and Mary as parents, and learn the ways of humans and to be human, and to work for 30 years in place before he did any of his public ministry.
Yep.
How do we recover some of this, even in a place like missions where we say, God says, go,
right,
but then go deep and stay?
Right. So we typically take Matthew 28, Mark 16, these texts where Jesus says go, and we sort of abstract them as if he wants us to always be going.
Yeah.
So he did say, you will go from Jerusalem to Judea and Samaria and to the uttermost bounds of the earth. But what we have to remember is that in church history, they went somewhere and then they stayed.
Yeah.
And they built communities of stability. They built churches. They built houses. Jeremiah 29:11, we know, for the plans I have for you to prosper. What we don't realize most of the time is the context is 70 years of exile. And he says, as you're living in exile, plant crops, build houses, marry your children off, go for it, seek the peace and the prosperity of the place to which I have sent you. It's Babylon. This is the place they don't want to be. And the whore of Babylon, right? Like their arch enemies. And God says, hey, settle in, baby. It's gonna be 7 decades. And and for I know the plans I have for you. Like wherever you are, I'm going to make you prosper. And so there's that. They left, but in their leaving, they went and found their place, and they created communities of stability. Another thing that's interesting to me, which you alluded to, is that Jesus takes on the smallest of all prepositions. Jesus of Nazareth. We think that salvation comes into the world as God sprinkles the fairy dust from the balconies of heaven, and God from a distance does this amazing, miraculous. No. What happens is Jesus crashes through the amniotic baptismal waters of Mary's womb and spills out onto the dirt floor of Galilee and lives his life walking those streets, working the carpentry with his family. He goes to a church every week. Jesus goes to the synagogue as was his custom, Luke 4:18. Jesus is embedded in the community. And I would like to ask you, Joshua, because you lived 5 years in Jordan, right? Just across the Jordan River, the east side. You know what these communities look like. You know that it's dusty roads. You know that it's backwoods. You know that it's difficult. Like when you think about having lived there 5 years, what shocks you about God moving into a place like that?
Yeah, well, the place that I lived about 5 miles from the Syrian border, up north of Jordan, working with refugees that came across during the war in a really poor, dirty, dusty, ugly town. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, in the mountains of Western Washington, seeing Mount Rainier every day. Beautiful. I thought the whole world looked like that. And then I'm dropped into this place where physically I think it's ugly, but spiritually it's incredibly beautiful. And it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever lived because I felt like I was there. And the people were there with me. Even though we were all working together as a transient community, we found our place there, and we found that we could actually find Jesus in the midst of that place. And so for somebody like God to come to a place like that, where nobody, every single time I tell people I lived in Mafraq, which means the cross, whereas every Jordanian looked at me like, you live there? Why do you live there? Why would you ever move there? And it was the same thing with Jesus, right? Everybody said, why? Nothing good comes out of Nazareth.
Right.
Why would you ever be there? And so I think it's the same thing where God is saying that even in the mundane and the little and the small, there's beauty, there's holiness, there's sacred work that is happening, and God is at work.
And let me say that every saint from the time of Jesus on, predating Jesus's incarnation, all the prophets were from places. They were known from their place, right? All the saints after Jesus, Saint Augustine of Hippo, we've got Hildegard of Bingen, we've got Teresa of Avila, we've got Mother Teresa of Calcutta, we've got Martin Luther King of, right? We know he's walking the Selma streets, he's in Birmingham, he's in, if you want to live a big and meaningful life, you have to crunch it down really small and really local and really particular and really personal. We have this American myth of you can transcend the particularities of your place and live a beautiful life. And we think our icons are just out there in the ether. But church history and human history have to tell us that if you want to make a difference, you have to get really small and local and personal. And Jesus of Nazareth is a marching order for all of us. Yeah. So I ask people, what's your name? You're Joshua of, right? And I'm Daniel of. And have you filled in the blank, and have you fallen in love with your place?
If we're trying to transcend our place and reach new heights, a lot of it is I'm looking at it through an individualistic lens, Western lens. You go into the Middle East where Jesus was born. It's a very communal culture. I was in a place where, everybody helps one another. I fought against that. At the very beginning when we moved there, I wanted to go buy a vacuum cleaner because we had to vacuum. And my wife was like, no, go ask our neighbor. We need to be reliant on the local people and to help. And so I went to ask our neighbor, and that started to build a beautiful reciprocal relationship there because I was dependent and I had need, and I said, let's do this in community. How can we start to build community and build structure and place in a Western individualistic culture?
Yeah. A great psychologist and social observer has studied our moment in time. And by the way, it's important to zoom out and interrogate our moment in time. Like, put ourselves on the witness stand and ask why we're living the way we're living.
Yeah.
And realize that we are living a human experiment.
Yeah.
For the first time, the last 75 years, let's just say since World War II, we are living a human experiment. We have deeper pockets than we've ever had, and we might be more relationally bankrupt than we've ever been.
Yeah.
Why are we on the drugs that we're on? Why are we looking for sexual promiscuity? Because we have divorced ourselves from our places and from our communities, and we're free-floating individuals. And we have to ask, how's that working out for us? And so this social commentator said, what we need to recover is duty-bound relationships, where we don't buy a vacuum for every house that we have. We will buy the vacuum. You guys buy the lawnmower. Like we went out 5 years ago and bought some land, and my sister and brother-in-law are next door with their 4 kids, and our friends are next door with their 4 kids, and we've got our 3 kids. We have one mower that we share. My brother-in-law, we get lots of snow. He's got a plow. He'll come over and plow it. We'll give him money for helping us plow because it would be stupid of us to all buy 3 big plows. We can't afford that, but he has one. And so he's going to take care of us in that way, and we're going to take care of him, reciprocate the blessing. And their kids come over to our house, and when they're over, we feed them. And our kids go to their houses, and when they're over there, they feed them. And we help each other with laundry. And my wife will, give a gallon of milk to our neighbors who ran out. It just, the duty bound, I am committed to you. You are committed to me. Let's quit living as strangers with people all around us. And so I think we just need to put ourselves on the stand, ask how it's working out, and then go visit northern Jordan and go see how people live. I've been in the Bekaa Valley, just on the other side of the border in Lebanon, working with the same refugees. And it's stunning to me, the simple joy. They're heartbroken. They've been disaffected. Their lives have been turned upside down. You have lived in that moment, right? And they also have deep friendships, and they're committed to one another, and they have something to teach us. Mm-hmm. We have deep pockets. They have deep lives. Yeah. And it's time for us to recover those duty-bound relationships.
Yeah, oftentimes we would sit in refugee homes, and, we found people that were open to Jesus, hungry for Jesus, wanted to study the words and the ways of Jesus. And so we would do that. Then we would often ask them, do you have any family members or friends that you would like to share this with, and so that they could continue to share Jesus? And they often said, well, we are all alone. We don't have any of our family here anymore. And then all of a sudden next week we have, their cousins are over when we're over. There are all sorts of family members that are scattered about. But I think what they're saying is that we used to live among hundreds of family members, and now 30 family members seems nothing to them.
Right.
They said we have been, dislocated from our place and our family, our tribe, the people that we know and they love, that I rely on. And so they felt dislocated. And oftentimes, I think in the West, we feel dislocated. We feel like we move from one place to another. In my 20s, moved, every 2 years I would move. And it wasn't until really Jordan, where that was the longest stint, after I was 18, I lived in a place. And now Kansas City is the longest stint I've lived in a place. How do we work through that dislocation in our lives when we're constantly moving about? It seems to me like every community now is almost a transient community.
It's true. Well, first, 2 things come to mind. First off, there are certain people who have to move.
Yeah.
I'm not romanticizing place. I'm not acting as if everyone has agency. Okay. So there are people who there has been a great economic uprooting for people, and they have to go to a new region to find work. There are immigrants in Central America who are moving up because they're fleeing for their lives. So there are people who are pressed into having to move. There are military families that sign up for a 20-year commitment that every 3 years we're going to find a new place. So let me just say, there are going to be certain people who have to move. If you fall into that category, there are ways of being that will help you not live as dislocated as you might feel, right? So rhythms and routines. Get to the new place. And my father-in-law had to move. He was an executive at Sears, and there was a stretch where they were moving in 3-year increments. He would go ahead to the place before they moved. He would find a church that he wanted his family to go to, and he would find a school that he wanted his kids to attend, and he'd buy a house like right in the middle of that. because he wanted every Sunday we're going to be in church, every Wednesday night we're going to be in church, and our kids need to be close to school where they can walk to and fro. And he made decisions that made community more possible. A lot of times people will have to move, and I live in a military town. We have 4 military installations in Colorado Springs, more than any other city in America. Every 3 years, Colorado Springs turns over 33%.
Wow.
So you talk about transients, I watch it in 3-year cycles. Some of those military families have told me the easiest thing to do when they land in a new place is to mail it in. They, we're going to, we're going to be gone in another 2.5 years. We're going to be packing boxes. And is it really worth it? It's kind of hard to make friends. And so they said the easiest thing to do, like entropy sets in, and you shut down and you circle the wagons. And they said, when we are living well, the first thing we do is we go to church the first weekend we're there. We get our kids in sports. We invite people over to our house. We work hard to make friends. And the people who live that way have a happiness that others don't. So if you're having to move, there are ways of being that will help you not feel as dislocated. The other group of people that I want to talk to are the people that I think loneliness often can be a self-inflicted wound. And we have to ask ourselves the question, why would we move? And so I'll sit with couples that are doing premarital counseling. I've done over 100 weddings as a pastor. And I'll say, okay, in your premarital counseling, let's talk about what matters to you. Let's say you two get married and you're living in Colorado Springs and you're making, between the two of you, $65,000. And Kansas City calls. I always use Kansas City because it's close enough, right? And it's a market like ours. Kansas City calls and they say, we've got $90,000 with your name on it. And I say, what do you do? And they look at each other, and inevitably someone will go, it's Kansas City. It's a no-brainer. It's 25 grand more. And I'll go, is it? What do you have in Colorado Springs that makes you rich? And they'll go, well, we love our church and we've got really good friends. We went to high school here, and I've got one set of family members that's here. And then, okay, when you have kids, would you want to take your kid over to grandparents, or are they trustworthy? Yeah, I would love my grandparents for my kids around. Well, Kansas City doesn't have grandparents. And you start asking people what is valuable, and they start crunching those numbers that don't really show up in spreadsheets. And they go, gosh, I'm really rich in Colorado Springs. Mm-hmm. $65K is more than the $95K or $90K that I would make there. So we have said that if you make more money, you should go. Climb the ladder. Take the next best opportunity, because that's what makes you rich. And saints of old, today we talk about financial capital. Yeah. The saints of old would talk about relational and social capital. Mm-hmm. And we don't really have that conversation today. So this book that I've written is trying to get people to think about the layers of riches and the texture of a meaningful life that makes one happy and that keeps one from feeling unnecessarily lonely.
Mm. One of the things that you wrote is about the stability of a family that helps you rooted. Like, hey, if everything is good at our family, everything is good. And I just want to share a quick story. I had a moment like that. I was 21 years old. I just got hired as the high school girls varsity basketball coach at a local high school. And what 21-year-old man is coaching 17, 18-year-old girls? I mean, it may not have been the best thing, but I did get hired.
Making $12,000 a year or something, right?
And but about a week after I was hired, the school board called me in and they fired me. And it was on my dad's birthday. I went into the office to celebrate my dad and to celebrate his birthday. The school board fired me. Nobody knew about it. My sister was coming to, celebrate my dad. I told her that, I just got fired. She got angry. She was mad. And she ended up getting into an accident, needing to go into the hospital, and just to get checked out. So we go, it's my dad's birthday. I just got fired, and we're sitting in the hospital, and, my sister is okay. She's fine. And, after we know that she is okay, our pastor came in And we're sitting there as a family. The pastor and my dad just looks and said, if we're okay as a family, we're okay. Nothing else matters. Like, this is it. And that moment has stuck with me for my entire life. I reflected on it this week as we were working this out in church and thinking about a time where I knew that God had always loved me in moments. And that moment was the thing that stuck out to me. Like, this is where God has loved me and saying, I actually am stable within a family that no matter what, we're together.
Yes. And bro, that is a beautiful story. And the difference between someone who's out on the streets and someone like you, when crisis hits, is you've got the safety net of a people who will fight for you. You will have 100 couches to surf on for as long as you need. You will not be out on the street corner. Why? Because you have that social capital, the family bond strong. And those are the things, like, your worst case scenario, Joshua, is livable. Really? Yeah. Okay. So I'm with my parents and they're going to help me through a hard time and we're going to be fine. We're going to make it.
Yeah.
And to lay your head on the pillow at night and know you have that is the thing that truly makes you rich. It's the thing that truly makes you able to take a deep breath and live in peace. And this is why, and now some of you are going, well, what about the person that's out on the street? This is why the family of God actually becomes the crucial piece in refamilying the world.
Yeah.
So someone goes, I don't have the biological family that Daniel has and that Joshua has. Well, welcome to the family of God, where we are not defined by biological bloodline, by the blood of Jesus Christ. And when you commit to that routine of every week, showing up with the same people in the same place, and you share your stories and you invite people to pray for you, you look up 10 years later and you find that the net holds and that you haven't fallen through. And this is why Paul says, weep with those that weep and rejoice with those that rejoice. And on any given Sunday, the room is filled with 50% of people who are weeping and 50% of people who are rejoicing. And you stay together and look up in 15, 20 years and tell me if you don't love your life.
Yeah, that's beautiful and necessary. Is how do we engage the family of God, bring people into the family of God? Working with Muslims, people would say yes to Jesus, knowing that they're becoming a part of his family. It was different than a Western guilt, innocence type of conversion story that, Jesus died for my sins and now I'm okay because he died for my sins. It was, come into God's family. You have been outcast and now you're a part of the family. That's the thing that, draws people, especially in communal cultures where they see this, they know this, they feel it, they touch it, like this is who they are.
It's the way that the world stays together. Honestly, the honor, shame, Middle Eastern and Asian cultures have so much to teach us, the African cultures, because you're right. They're not saying yes to an individualized escape to heaven. They're saying yes to a global family of every tribe, tongue, nation, and people group, with people who will open their hearts and open their pocketbooks and open their homes to walk you through. And Jesus told us that this is what it would be. And I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma with this prosperity gospel thing, okay? Yeah. There's so much that I love about my upbringing, but the prosperity gospel, where they got it wrong, is they took these stories from Jesus and they individualized them. So Jesus said, if anyone's willing to leave houses and mothers and sisters and brothers to follow me in this life, you will have 100 times more. And the prosperity gospel says 100 times more means I'm going to make 100-fold and I'm going to be able to buy the nice car and the nice house and be okay by myself. What he's saying is, if you follow me, and if it ends up costing you your family, if you get disinherited, if you get disowned, guess what? You're going to have 100 different people in your church that's going to walk with you, and they've said yes to me, and they will become your family, and they will show up at the hospital, and they will feed you, and they will help you bury your parents. And if you'll say yes to me, it might cost you with your family of origin, but it will not cost you the larger family. You'll be richer than you were before. And so we have a whole lot of community to recover in our Western moment. And I think actually, Joshua, that the COVID shutdown, the way the world kind of for a couple of years collapsed inward, has made us really, really hungry. I think we're on the precipice. We're at this critical mass moment where people are actually willing to say yes to the larger family of God because they've been isolated, they've been lonely, and the good news will actually be good news in this cultural moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why, but it came, after World War II in Japan, people were inviting missionaries over saying, the people are now hungry and open and they need Jesus, and missionaries didn't show up. Somebody was asking the other day, why haven't we seen a big church movement in Japan like we have in the other Asian communities in China and Korea and such? And part of it is that when crisis hits and when there was a need, just like there is right now in America and the world, that there is some good news to share, we were silent and didn't share that good news and start to actually set in place new communities, different communities, communities of faith and communities of God. And we decided to say, I'm okay with my own life. I'm okay with a military family coming in and letting apathy take front place and say, I'm just going to phone it in. So I just want to encourage listeners and people like, hey, the moment is now, and people are hungry and searching for good news, and they need some hope. The anxiety, depression, crisis in our country is rampant and huge, and Jesus is good news for those who are seeking good news.
Yes. You better preach, Joshua.
Yes. Well, one of the things, and I was thinking, especially with reading The Power of Place, is building flourishing kingdom communities that over the long haul, like you were able to give us a little brief glimpse of what it looks like in a specific, part of a neighborhood. What does it look like over the long haul to build cities and communities of kingdom flourishing because we are faithful and rooted in Jesus?
A story comes to mind. 11 years ago, our senior pastor was invited to a meeting with the mayor. And we're a church that's been around 40 years now in our city, and we've weathered storms. And so I think we're kind of on the map for our city as a lighthouse, a city on a hill that can't be hidden. So the mayor called, and our senior pastor, Brady Boyd, went down and met with the mayor. And Brady asked a really great question. He said, tell me about Colorado Springs. Tell me something about Colorado Springs that I don't know. And the mayor said, well, I'll tell you what you don't know. There's tens of thousands of uninsured and underinsured families in our city that can't get medical care. And Brady said, really? Tell me more. And so he started detailing, giving the data. And so Brady comes back to the elders and we start praying on it. And they said, we got to open a free medical clinic for women in our city, right in the heart of our city. Don't put it up in the suburb where they can't get there. We don't have bus systems that get people up to the suburb. We're like, go to the middle, the heart of our city where people can walk and where the buses will take them. And so we opened up a Dream Centers women's medical clinic, and it's state of the art and it's free. We've got dental care. We've got chiropractic care. We've got the psychologists that volunteer their time, these women who've been in trauma, and they need to just come share. They can't afford counseling, but we give it to them for free. There's state-of-the-art medical imaging system. So a woman will come in, and next door is a Planned Parenthood across the parking lot. And here's the Dream Centers Women's Clinic. And we've got a 4D imaging ultrasound, which is better than what most hospitals have in our city. Yep. And these women come in and they get a scan and they see the eyelashes of their little baby. Like, that's how clear it is. And they go, holy smoke, like that's a human. Look at that nose that's all wrinkled up. It looks like me, and it's so cute. And they decide for life. And so we started that because our senior pastor said, tell me something about our city that we don't know. He goes in and meets with the mayor a couple years later and says, here's a report, here's what we're doing. Now, what's changed in our city? Tell me something that I don't know about today's Colorado Springs. And he said, we have 800 single moms and their kids sleeping in their cars at night in parks all around our city. So it gets dark and the police are kind of leaving the parks, and these moms will pull in under the cover of darkness, kind of with their looking over their shoulder, and they pull under a dark little awning, and they sleep with their 3 kids in their car. And if they tell DHS what's going on, very often the kids will get taken from them. And if you're a mom that's worth your salt, you're not letting your babies go. So these are the working poor. They're not indigent, wasted, like the working poor who can't get in because of the housing crisis. And so we started praying again, and we bought an 18-unit apartment complex, renovated it, made it world-class. And now Mary's home, we call it Mary's home because Jesus's mom was a single mom when Jesus died.
Yeah.
He looks down to John and he says, hey, take care of my mom. And so now we've got 18 moms with their kids, and they're getting college degrees. They're getting great medical care. The kids are in great schools. They're building their lives. And so the question, to your question, you need to find out about your city. And if you're a church community, ask yourself, if we shuttered our doors overnight, would our city be sad?
Yeah.
Would anybody notice that we were gone? And if not, then we've got some soul searching to do. And so it doesn't mean you can buy an apartment complex, but what can you do? Make it particular, specify it to your story, to your community. If all of us sign back up for our places, not only will the people be taken care of, but it's hard to leave a city that you've bled for. It's hard to leave a city that you've cried over. It's hard to leave a city that you stained it with your tears. Yeah. And so if we will do that, I think our communities will be better, and I think we'll be slower to leave.
That's so good. That's so good. And I think we need to ask those questions and know that your skills and the way that God made you and created you can serve a greater purpose and a really good purpose within your city and your place. And, one of the things that I am sad about is that, especially within cities, and we have these women that are spending the night with their kids in their car. You have people that are uninsured and can't get medical care. We don't talk to each other in different services and different people. Pastors don't talk to mayors in many cities. We don't have the church communicating with the healthcare system and saying, what can we do and how can we serve and how can we collaborate? We're not talking to the people that are like suffering great injustice. We're trying to come up with our own plans to figure out how to meet those systemic injustices that are happening. How we have to go under and have these conversations and start to talk with people. How can somebody with some power, like a New Life has a lot of privilege and power and has a lot of finances to get behind, how could a church community like that, or any church community like that, go into a place, the center of the city, and say, we're here without overbearing people, but actually serving the actual needs of the place?
Yes. We have to ask questions. We want to go give the gift that we think our city needs, and it's actually the thing our city does not need. So, humility, inquire, be patient, go slow, show up and ask questions, don't make announcements. So, living with humility, but I want to crunch it down from the sort of corporate, larger church zone to the individual zone. There's a lady in our church who has great power. They own a small apartment complex, and they've got 12 units, and they own it cash, and they're good. And they're 50, and they don't have to work another day in their lives. God has blessed them, and they busted their butts. And if anyone could go play golf and take more cruises and go get a pedicure and a manicure and just mail it in for the next 30 years, it's this family. And you know what they do? They will look for a widow, an old widow who just buried her husband, and she's on the brink, and she's having to find out what life post a 50-year marriage looks like. And they'll say, come live in our place and come live for free. We'll give you 6 months. We know you're in a vulnerable time. So come in our place. We don't need anything from you. We want to exist for your good. So that's her and her husband. She is a math genius. And I stink at math. You wouldn't want me helping anyone with their homework, right? But she's this math genius. And again, she could be pedicuring and manicuring her way to 85 years old. She goes to a school in a dilapidated neighborhood without a budget. And she goes and she tutors these kids every week in math. And she's world class. And their scores have skyrocketed because this woman shows up every single week. She's gracious. She's kind. She's fun. She brings little toys for the kids. You love being with her. She's doing it for free. And so to just ask this question, what is in your hand? What can you do? She can teach math. I can teach drum lessons. My wife can do, it's just, all of us have skills that God has given us. That if we'll just take what's in our hand, it doesn't have to be rocket science. We don't have to overcomplicate this. Look around, see what the world needs, see where your giftings intersect with what the world needs, and then give it away and build routines. If she was just showing up once every 6 months, she can't make a dent. But every Tuesday, she's showing up at that school, and they know her name, and she's gotten to know them, and she's changing their lives. So yes, ask about your church. What can your church do? But also say, what has God given me? And where does the world need what I have? And then go do it.
Yeah. Your talents, your abilities, and where there is need, they intersect. That's where you're going to make impact for the kingdom of God. That's good. I love that story. Couple of questions I have for you. One, if you go back to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Play the long game. Don't be in a hurry. We want to tell our 21-year-olds that they can have their best lives and just live full and vibrant and crush it by 25. It's not true. Slow down. Serve people. Get to know people. Be faithful. Show up on time. Stay late. Don't have anything that's below you. Be a servant. Wash the feet of the world. Play the long game. Tell me if doing that for 10 years doesn't pay off. And then at 31, you show up after 10 years and the Lord Jesus Christ, some mysterious day, comes up and looks you in the eye and says, to the one who's been faithful with the little, I will make you ruler over much. Boom. And the windows of heaven open up and people start throwing you the keys and telling you to lead it. So play the long game and resist the urge to try to rush a beautiful life. There's no rushing a beautiful life.
Yeah.
You can't force roots to go deep by waving a magic wand. And kids these days, here I am, 40, I'm bald, I can say that now. They think if they work hard for 6 months, hey man, why am I not getting promoted? Why am I not, no one sees the genius in me. No one sees and I'm just going to take my ball and go home and find the next place. No, talk to me after 10 years. And then Jesus will go, I can trust you with more. So play the long game, be faithful, and tell me if you hate what Jesus gives you after 10 years of faithfulness.
That's so good. Play the long game, be faithful. If you do the little things right, big things are going to happen. I was, as a basketball coach, I know that, if you're going to set a screen and you're an inch off, you're 2 inches off, people are going to get around you, just those little, basketball, a game of inches, right? And so I think life is too, that, we could do those little things and just one actually they can be faithful. I think long-term faithfulness is lacking, but it's necessary in the, in the history of the world, and especially today, we need it. Anything you've been reading, watching lately you could recommend?
Oh man, listen, I love Madam Secretary. I know that's maybe silly. It's a bit of an older show. Taya Leone just crushes it as a leader. You see the Secretary of the United States. They do a great job of showing the home life and the complexity of teenage kids and life goes on.
Yeah.
But when she's in these high stakes conversations, there's an articulate speech that goes forth. I'm a man of words, so I'm paying attention to that. But also the backroom dynamics of leadership and negotiation and, trying to find common ground. That's been a fun show for me. Reading, man. Gosh, Andrew Arndt's book, I picked it up again this weekend. I know you've interviewed him. He's my brother. Streams in the Wasteland is absolutely excellent. So check out Joshua Johnson's interview with him on Shifting Culture Pod. Go find Andrew Arndt. That's a great book. Those are two that stand out to me just right off the top.
That's great. That's good. If you could leave the audience with one thing, what would you leave them with?
What would I leave them with? Spend time figuring out what true riches are. Ask yourself the question, what makes a human being deeply rich? And get out a spreadsheet or get out a legal pad. I'm a pen and paper guy. Get out a legal pad and start accounting what you have. Start accounting for gaps. Where do I have an ache? Pay attention to the pain. The Spirit the pain is an invitation. The longing is an invitation. So if you are lonely, if you are longing for community, I promise you it's right in front of you. It will require commitment to rhythms and routines. We want the payoff of community. We don't want to do the hard work of showing up every single week. Just do it. So get out and ask what makes one truly rich and start particularizing it to your life and see where the ache is, where the pain is, where the longing is, and ask the Spirit what the invitation is, and then commit to rhythms and routines and talk to me in 10 years.
I love it. So Daniel, thank you so much for this conversation. I love that you walked us through what does it look like to be stable in a world where it's very unstable, and how we could be faithful and rooted to a place and to a people and to the place that God had called us to over the long haul and the long term. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been fantastic. I loved it.
Thanks for having me on the Shifting Culture Podcast, Joshua. Honored to be here.
Thank you for listening to the show today. If you're really enjoying the show, please don't forget to hit the follow button on your favorite podcast app. You could do it right now. Just hit that little plus. And then I would love it if you would leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. So you could go right now to the show and leave a star rating and review and let us know how you are enjoying the show. And find us on Facebook and Instagram. So if you want to connect, interact, I post a lot of quotes and different things that you could actually interact with the episodes and let me know how you are enjoying the show. If you feel inclined to donate, there is a support the show link in the show notes, and it would send you directly to a page where you could donate so that new episodes can be produced for your enjoyment. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an incredible week.